Well, during much of the COVID pandemic, thousands of Australians were locked out of their own country, prevented from coming home lest they bring with them what turned out to be a virus with a lower than 1% infection fatality rate. The media didn't seem to care. These people were, to most editors, out of sight and out of mind for their readers. But recently the media has become concerned about the welfare of a different type of expatriate. The same journalists and editors who showed little or no concern for law-abiding Australians abandoned by their own country are now writing stories about Australians who did the opposite. When Islamic State attempted to create a caliphate in the middle of a civil war in Syria in 2014, dozens of Australians went off to join them. It was obviously a dream come true for some of them. The peace and prosperity of democratic Australia was nothing compared to the prospect of a new society ruled by theocratic murderers. That society was eventually crushed. Now those Australian expatriates find themselves on the losing side and in jail in some cases, and they've rediscovered their Australian patriotism. Ellen Winnett, a journalist at The Australian, said this morning, quote, "Syria has asked countries to take their citizens home, take responsibility for them, try them if required, rehabilitate them if not, but either way, take them home and deal with them on home soil," unquote. My next guest, Spectator Australia writer Alexandra Marshall, says there are several flaws in this argument. Alexandra, welcome.
Having me.
Alexandra, that journalist from The Australian presents the repatriation as having two outcomes, either a trial or rehabilitation. Now let's take the first outcome, shall we? A trial. Is it possible to try a repatriated Australian for crimes committed 8 years ago on a battlefield in the middle of a third world nation?
Just before I answer that question, the first time The Australian tried this, I think they ran about 15 articles over one weekend trying to bring the ISIS brides home and their children, and they got the exact same response the last time as they did this time, which was, to put it as politely as physically possible, bugger off, because Australians do not want anything to do with terrorists who left to fight for a foreign power. But your question about whether or not you can try them, well, we've already been told by the government that no, they won't be trying pretty much any of these ISIS brides or any of the other people they bring back home because they don't have any evidence. The crimes were committed in another country, they can't investigate them, so no, they're just going to pretty much have a catch and release program where they catch them in Syria and then release them into Australia.
So to suggest that they might be tried when they come home is pretty much deceptive.
False. It's false. I mean, they've already said they're not going to.
Okay, let's look at the second potential outcome, rehabilitation. This is based on the assumption that if we hold out the olive branch, we will receive gratitude in return. Is this what usually happens in these situations, Alexandra?
Well, there are two questions there. The first is, can you rehabilitate somebody? And the second is, do they deserve to be rehabilitated? So the second one, no, they don't deserve a second chance. They knew exactly what they were doing. These were adults who left the country to fight terror, to hurt and traumatise and injure law-abiding Australians and other allies around the world. So no, they don't deserve the opportunity to start with. The second is, can you? Now, we have to remember that this is a religion. So for those of you who are religious watching, would you be able to be deconverted from your religion by the state? Is that a reasonable expectation? And we know from experience that almost nobody gets rehabilitated from this kind of ideology. There's a few maybe who change their mind, but it's such a minuscule percentage. The more likely occurrence is that they will come here and start radicalising more people to their cause, and we will have our new homegrown terror. It is a ridiculous, dangerous and reckless proposition.